My neighbor is 40-year-old man is connected to my age's 32-year-old Wi-Fi network and saw porn on a network share. Now he thinks I'm a child molester. Throw away for shame. A few months ago my neighbor came over to ask if he could borrow my Wi-Fi password because his cable modem was having some technical issues. Since I didn't mind helping him out, I gave him my password without a second thought and quickly forgot about the situation. I didn't think much of it at the time and life went on as usual. However, about 2 weeks ago I was in the middle of trying to set up a simple way to watch a movie on my TV using my home network. To make this work, I plugged an external hard drive into my router to access the media files. The external hard drive had a variety of content stored on it, including music, videos, and some adult material. The intention was just to have a better and easier way to enjoy content through the TV, and I didn't expect anything unusual to come of it. For the last week or so my neighbor has been acting unusually cold toward me, which I found really strange. Normally when we see each other outside we exchange casual greetings or at least acknowledge each other with a wave or a smile, but recently he hasn't even said hello. It felt a little off, especially since we had always had a friendly rapport before. Not only that, but I noticed that he has been keeping his kids away from my dogs, which is also unusual because they used to love playing with them whenever they got the chance. My dogs are friendly and enjoy the attention, so it was always a nice interaction when his kids would stop by. But now it seems like he's avoiding any kind of interaction altogether. After noticing all these changes in his behavior, I decided it was time to ask him directly, so I approached him and said, "What's up?" hoping to figure out what had been going on. He completely went off on me when I asked what was going on. He started accusing me of being a pervert and went as far as saying he thinks I'm a child molester. He told me he didn't want me anywhere near his family anymore, and it honestly left me completely stunned. I've always been a good neighbor to him and we had a great relationship up until this point. We'd mow each other's lawns and help each other out whenever one of us needed it. His kids would often take my dogs for walks when I had to work late, and we'd have dinner together either at my house or his 2 or 3 times a month. It was a normal, friendly dynamic that I never expected would come to an abrupt halt over something like this. I couldn't believe how quickly things had shifted and how strongly he had turned against me. To go from being close neighbors and friends to being accused of something so serious left me confused and hurt. We live in Texas and my neighbor is a devout Catholic. He attends church every week and has 3 daughters, aged 8 to 13. I can only imagine how challenging it must be for him to raise 3 young daughters and keep them safe in today's world. As someone who has a much younger sister, I understand the protective instinct he has for his family. I get it, he wants to make sure his kids are raised in a safe and wholesome environment. But at the same time I can't help but feel that he's overreacting. To me, porn is just porn. It's something that many adults engage with in private, and while I wouldn't want my sister to be involved in anything inappropriate, I don't see watching adult content as a crime or something to be ashamed of. It's just a form of entertainment, even if it's something that may not be suitable for younger people. Of course, it's important to keep things in perspective and ensure things are done in private and within the bounds of what's appropriate, but at the end of the day, it feels like he's blown this way out of proportion. I understand that you feel the content wasn't extreme, but your neighbor's reaction was based on what he saw and his interpretation of it. You may not have intended to make anyone uncomfortable, but sometimes situations like this can lead to misunderstandings, especially when people have different views on what is acceptable and what isn't. Pornography, even if it's more mainstream or doesn't seem particularly extreme to you, can be viewed differently depending on personal values, beliefs, and experiences. It's important to recognize that people, especially parents, may have heightened concerns when it comes to the safety and well-being of their children. Given your neighbor's protective nature, he might have jumped to conclusions based on his personal feelings and religious background. It's difficult to change someone's perception once they've already formed an opinion, but it's always worth having an open and honest conversation to clear things up and make sure that any misunderstandings are addressed. However, it's also important to consider the boundaries of that relationship and how both parties feel about moving forward. I also had a handful of pictures from an ex-girlfriend, who was in her late 20s. On there, I wasn't in the pictures and her face wasn't really in any of them. The pictures were tame, no action shots, just her topless and a few shots of her on all fours. We recently broke up, but I'm not sure she was around the neighborhood enough for him to recognize the pictures of her. I really need some suggestions on how to fix the situation. I can't just pack up and sell my house over this, so I'm going to have to live next to the guy. The last thing I want is for this misunderstanding to cause ongoing tension in the neighborhood. I'm a single guy living in a neighborhood full of families, and the idea that his family might start spreading rumors about me is honestly terrifying. What's even worse is the thought of people in the neighborhood who may not say anything to my face but will start gossiping behind my back. We live in a very tight-knit cul-de-sac where everyone knows each other, and it's common for us all to get together for happy hours, BBQs, and other social events with the whole neighborhood. I know that many of the stay-at-home moms around here can be really quick to gossip about the smallest things, almost like schoolgirls, and I really don't want to become the topic of their conversations. The idea that I could be the subject of rumors that could make things awkward, if not worse, is really weighing on me. It's such a small community that the potential fallout could be much bigger than just what's going on with my neighbor. Please update this post. His kids only have iPhones and iPads, and the only possible way they could have come across the external hard drive would be if they were using his office computer. I can understand that exposing children to explicit content like porn would be bad, and I really don't think that happened in this case. It's important to note that the only time they could have accessed it would have been if they had somehow used his computer without supervision. Given that his kids are young, I really don't think they had the opportunity to do that. Even though I'm concerned about the situation, I'm hopeful that the kids didn't accidentally stumble upon anything inappropriate. However, I know that if it had happened, it would have been a much more serious issue, and I would have done everything I could to prevent it. Still, considering how the whole situation unfolded, I don't think his kids had any exposure to it, and I'm hoping that they never did. He has posted update on June 23, 2024. Okay, so lots of good advice in the original post. Thanks. I need to stress that I didn't want my talk with him to be about me telling him I'm right and he's wrong like a lot of posts suggested. I think that if you feel the need to be right, you aren't going to be a good neighbor. The approach I took was more, I need to understand why you feel the way you do. Just before lunch today I decided to take the initiative and knocked on my neighbor's door. I was hoping to have a conversation with him and clear the air about everything that had happened. When he opened the door, it was obvious he wasn't happy to see me standing there. His expression was a bit cold and I could tell that he wasn't too eager to talk. Despite his clear reluctance, he agreed to come over to my house and have a discussion. He mentioned that he didn't want to have this conversation in front of his family, which I understood and respected. I could see that he was trying to avoid making things more complicated for his wife and kids, which I appreciated. Fair enough, I thought, and I agreed to the arrangement, knowing that it would give us a chance to talk in private and hopefully resolve the tension between us. I asked him point blank why he had come to the conclusion that I was a child molester. I told him, with as much calm as I could muster, that I wasn't one and that I thought the insinuation was not only false but also potentially harmful and damaging to my reputation within the community. I explained to him that I had always been careful with my actions and choices, and that labeling someone as something so serious based on a misunderstanding could have long-lasting effects. I also reminded him of the time he had met my ex-girlfriend, and I pointed out that she was only 5 years younger than me, emphasizing that this was the biggest age gap I had ever had in a relationship. I wanted to make it clear that I didn't have any inappropriate tendencies and that the situation he was assuming was just a misunderstanding, not anything based in reality. I felt it was important to bring up my past relationships to help him understand that I wasn't some kind of predator and that there was no reason for him to make such accusations. I didn't deny having porn on the drive, and I didn't try to shift the blame onto anyone else, but I did make it clear to him that all the material on the drive was legal. I explained that I often watched it with my ex-girlfriend as a way to further clarify that it wasn't something secretive or inappropriate. I could tell that he was still struggling with his perception of the situation, so I decided to ask him directly why he had jumped to the conclusion that it was child porn. I wanted to understand if he had any specific reasons for thinking that, or if he just assumed that any porn at all automatically made me some sort of deviant. I felt it was important to challenge his assumptions and get to the root of his concern, especially since he had made such a serious and damaging accusation. I needed to address the issue head-on and try to correct any misconceptions he had about me and my actions. His first reaction was to tell me, "I know what I saw." But when I pressed him on what it was he saw, he said, "Pictures of kids and videos of people having sex." I asked him if he had looked through the whole drive and saw context around the pictures, and he just got this disgusted look on his face. "No, I didn't look through the whole drive." He claimed that he turned on a media server and it auto-detected the media because it was still on my network because the Wi-Fi password on the device was hard to change and he hadn't changed it back for him when his cable modem broke. He said his kids only normally used the device for Netflix, so he had kind of forgotten about it once things were working again. His explanation seemed a little wordy, but I let him talk as long as he wanted. Anyway, the situation became incredibly awkward at this point, and the tension in the air was palpable. Not wanting to let things spiral further, I offered to show him the drive again in an attempt to add some much-needed context to what he had seen. I could tell he wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea, but I insisted that he at least take a look at the file structure to help him understand the organization of everything. Honestly, it felt painful having to go through this with him, especially given how serious and uncomfortable the entire conversation had become. As I showed him the folders, I explained that the photos were from my past, and the only pictures of teenage girls were from my high school years or pictures of my sister. I made sure to point out that everything was neatly arranged in folders by year, just like I had mentioned in my previous post. However, when I showed him the structure, he seemed confused and said that he hadn't seen it organized this way before. According to him, what he had seen was a disorganized, unified view of all the files, with no folders to separate them. He explained that he had only glanced at the thumbnails when he went to watch a movie with his wife and kids, which was clearly a hasty and superficial look. He admitted that he hadn't taken the time to actually explore the drive and understand how it was structured or what the contents truly were. It was clear that his initial reaction was based on a very limited and rushed examination, and now he was starting to realize that there was more to it than he had first assumed. It was in front of his wife and kids. Repeat is super awkward. I felt it was important to apologize for the whole situation, especially the fact that his kids had been exposed to something they shouldn't have seen. I expressed how genuinely sorry I was that this happened. I still wasn't entirely sure how much they had actually seen, considering it was just the thumbnails that were visible on the screen. I took another look at the drive, and from what I could tell, none of the thumbnails on my Mac displayed any graphic or inappropriate images. However, I couldn't be completely certain about what was shown on his device or what his kids might have seen during the brief time they had access to it. I made it clear to him that I hadn't shown him any of the explicit content, but by this point, he seemed to be softening toward the idea that the whole incident was nothing more than a massive mistake and a misunderstanding. He seemed to begin accepting that the situation wasn't as sinister as he initially thought. To reinforce my transparency and willingness to clear everything up, I even offered to let him take the drive to the police if that was something he felt he needed to do. I was confident there was no child pornography on it and wanted to make sure he understood that I had nothing to hide. After some thought, he told me that he believed me, and at that point I could tell he was starting to feel more at ease about the situation, although the tension still lingered a bit. He explained to me that his intense negative reaction to porn stemmed from a deeply personal experience. He shared that his sister's marriage had been severely impacted by her husband's addiction to pornography. He said that his brother-in-law had become so consumed by his porn habits that it led him to lose his job, spiral into alcoholism, and ultimately become abusive toward his wife and kids. While he didn't explicitly say it, I assumed the abuse was likely physical in nature, not sexual. This deeply affected his family, and he felt the weight of needing to support his sister and her children. He went on to explain that he believed porn created unrealistic expectations in relationships, which he felt could cause a lot of damage. He expressed his concern that as long as I continued watching it, I would never be truly happy in a relationship. As much as I didn't fully agree with everything he said, I did recognize that there was some truth to his perspective, especially for certain individuals who might struggle with setting healthy expectations. At that point, he offered me an invitation to a support group at his church that focused on helping people overcome pornography addiction. He seemed genuinely concerned and hopeful that I would consider attending the group. I felt a bit sheepish, unsure of how to respond, but I told him I would look into it. This seemed to help calm him down, and he apologized for jumping to conclusions and assuming the worst. While the conversation was still awkward, it felt like there was some mutual understanding, and it appeared that the tension between us was starting to ease. Candidly, I don't know if I completely buy into his story. I've seen the way my TV interface works, and it only displays titles for media files, not thumbnails. I've also used the Boxee and WD Live interfaces before, and while WD Live might show previews of the clips, it doesn't display both images and videos in the same view, which makes me question the details of his explanation. Additionally, the router wasn't even set up as a DLNA server. It was just a basic network share. The technical setup doesn't really align with what he described, so there are a lot of gaps in his story that don't add up. In spite of this, I'm still trying to stay open-minded. It's possible that his kids saw something while using the media server, but I can't shake the feeling that he might have snooped on his own. There's just something about his reaction and the way he told the story that makes me think there's more to it. It's hard to ignore that nagging feeling even though I want to believe him. So, in the end, I'm left uncertain about whether or not he's being completely truthful with me. So, of course, I have absolutely no intention of actually going to a porn support group. However, I did take down the contact information from him for the guy who runs the group just in case. My plan is to possibly exchange a few emails with him, mostly to show that I'm at least acknowledging it and keeping the peace. I'll probably tell him that the times don't work for me and ask if he can suggest another group at a different church that might fit my schedule better. then I'll just leave it at that and let it fade away. Honestly, I don't see myself taking it any further than that, but I'll play along for now and see how it unfolds. We'll see if I even end up reaching out at all, but for the time being I'm just trying to keep things civil. Is update this post with edit? His speech was basically this: you won't be able to experience true love or have a meaningful marriage if you're still looking to other women, even in pictures, to get off. You can't have a happy marriage and still hold on to porn. I don't agree with that 100%, but I do think he's coming from a place where he genuinely wants the best for people. His heart is in the right place, and even though I don't buy into everything he says, it's kind of sweet to hear something like that, especially in 2013, considering how much negativity there often is toward religious perspectives online. People on Reddit love to hate on religion, but there's something kind of comforting and well-intentioned about his viewpoint. This whole situation got me thinking more about the context in which information is shared and how easily things can get taken out of context. Not to get all political, but I'm more terrified than ever about the NSA and the constant surveillance that we're under. They could just see a snapshot of something, misinterpret it, and poof, you could find yourself in a nightmare situation like being sent to Guantanamo for something completely harmless. I know it's a common sentiment on Reddit, but I just hope that we can turn things around in America and protect our privacy. It's such a crucial thing, and we're all so vulnerable to having our lives twisted or misunderstood based on a single piece of information that's out of context. Thank you so much for listening story to the end. If you enjoy our videos, so don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Have a good day, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it and hit the notification bell icon to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.